It is widely considered the single most agonizing moment in the modern history of Major League Baseball, and perhaps the most infamous umpiring decision ever made on a diamond. You are looking at a situation that defies all mathematical probability and logic where a pitcher did absolutely everything perfectly for 26 consecutive outs only to have his rightful place in the history books ripped away by a fraction of an inch and a split second of human error. This is not just a story about a blown call or a missed opportunity, because what happened in the immediate aftermath of this catastrophic mistake actually transcends the game of baseball itself. So, I have to ask you before we dive into this absolute roller coaster of emotions. If you had the crowning achievement of your entire professional career stolen from you in front of 40,000 screaming fans, how would you react? But to truly understand the magnitude of this robbery, we have to go back and look at who Armando Galarraga was before that fateful night in Detroit. Armando Galarraga was never supposed to be the guy throwing a perfect game, because he was not Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer or some heavily scouted phenom with a 100-mile-per-hour heater. He was a 28-year-old journeyman pitcher from Venezuela who had bounced around different organizations and was just fighting every single day to keep his spot in the starting rotation. But on the night of June 2nd, 2010, against the Cleveland Indians, something completely inexplicable happened to his right arm. He stepped onto the mound at Comerica Park and suddenly possessed a level of command that most pitchers only dream about in their sleep. His sinker was diving out of the strike zone at the absolute last possible millisecond, and his slider was biting so hard that major league hitters looked like they were swinging at ghosts in the batter's box. Through the first 6 innings, he had not allowed a single base runner to reach first base. By the 7th inning, the 40,000 fans inside the stadium realized they were witnessing something magical, and a nervous, anxious silence began to descend over the crowd. To truly appreciate this performance, we have to look at the advanced metrics from that night. Galarraga threw only 88 pitches over 9 innings, which is a staggering level of efficiency that you rarely see in the modern era. He did not rely on overwhelming velocity or extreme spin rates to overpower hitters. Instead, he masterfully painted the edges of the strike zone, inducing weak contact and relying heavily on the elite defense playing behind him. According to the data, he induced 13 ground ball outs and 0 barrels on the night. His sinker was registering right around 90 miles per hour, but the late horizontal movement made it virtually impossible to square up. He was pitching a flawless game of chess, completely dismantling the Cleveland lineup 1 weak grounder at a time. But if you think the early innings were impressive, wait until you see the absolute disaster that happened in the 9th inning. As he walked out to the mound for the top of the 9th inning, the atmosphere inside Comerica Park was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The 25th batter was Mark Grudzielanek, who worked a deep count before lifting a terrifying fly ball into deep center field that sent a collective gasp through the stadium before Austin Jackson made a spectacular over-the-shoulder catch for the first out of the inning. Then came the 26th batter, Mike Redmond, who hit a sharp grounder to the right side. Miguel Cabrera, the Tigers' massive first baseman, cleanly fielded the ball and stepped on the bag himself to secure the 26th out. The stadium absolutely exploded in deafening cheers. The fans were on their feet, jumping up and down, because history was exactly 1 out away. Armando Galarraga stood on the mound, completely stoic, breathing heavily and staring down the 27th batter of the night. That batter was Jason Donald. And what happened next is a sequence of events that will be permanently burned into the memory of every single person who watched it unfold. Galarraga wiped the sweat from his brow and delivered a sinking fastball that jammed Jason Donald on the hands. Donald swung and hit a weak chop ground ball toward the right side of the infield. Miguel Cabrera, the Tigers' massive first baseman, ranged far to his right to field the grounder cleanly, because Cabrera had moved so far away from the bag. Galarraga had to sprint off the pitcher's mound to cover first base himself. It was a textbook defensive play executed exactly how they practice it every single day in spring training. Cabrera flipped the ball to Galarraga, who caught it cleanly and stepped on the white base a full stride ahead of the sprinting Jason Donald. It was over. He had done it. Galarraga threw his arms up in celebration and began to smile because he had just pitched the 21st perfect game in the long and storied history of Major League Baseball. But then first base umpire Jim Joyce aggressively threw his arms out to his sides and screamed, "Safe!" The entire stadium went dead silent for a fraction of a second as their brains tried to process what they had just witnessed. And then absolute pure chaos erupted. Tigers manager Jim Leyland immediately sprinted out of the dugout completely red in the face, screaming at the top of his lungs and pointing aggressively at the first base bag. The crowd of 40,000 fans unleashed a chorus of boos so loud it literally shook the concrete foundations of the stadium. Replays were instantly shown on the massive video board in center field, and the slow-motion footage confirmed what everyone already knew. The ball was firmly inside Galarraga's glove and his foot was planted squarely on the base, while Jason Donald was still a full step away. It was not even a close play. It was an undeniable and catastrophic blunder on the biggest stage imaginable. Galarraga stood on the field with a look of pure disbelief, but he did not scream or throw his glove. He simply offered a wry, confused smile to the umpire, turned his back, and walked slowly to the mound to face the next batter. He retired Trevor Crowe on a ground out to third baseman Brandon Ing on the very next pitch to end the game, finishing with a one-hit shutout. But the damage was permanently done. A historic masterpiece had been ruined by a human error, and the baseball world was ready to absolutely crucify Jim Joyce. When the game ended, Jim Joyce walked into the umpire's locker room and asked to see the replay. According to reporters who were outside the room, Joyce watched the footage exactly once and then completely broke down in tears. He realized instantly the magnitude of his mistake. He had robbed a young pitcher of baseball immortality. But instead of hiding behind a PR statement, Joyce did something incredibly rare in professional sports. He opened the locker room doors to the media and stood before the cameras with tears streaming down his face. He looked directly into the lenses and stated that he had just cost that kid a perfect game. He admitted that he thought the runner beat the throw until he saw the replay and confessed that he had completely ruined a historic call. It was a moment of raw, devastating honesty from a man who knew he would forever be remembered as the villain of this story. While the record books will forever list it as a one-hit shutout with a completely fabricated infield single in the ninth inning, the baseball community has universally recognized it as a 27-out perfect game. But if you think the story ends with anger and resentment, you are entirely wrong, because what Armando Galarraga did the very next afternoon is the real reason we are still talking about this game today. The following day, the Detroit Tigers and Cleveland Indians were scheduled to play the final game of their series. Before the first pitch, the managers always meet at home plate to exchange lineup cards with the umpiring crew. Jim Leyland, the Tigers manager, purposely told Armando Galarraga to take the lineup card out to home plate. As Galarraga walked out of the dugout, the entire stadium stood up and delivered a deafening standing ovation. Waiting at home plate was Jim Joyce, who was serving as the home plate umpire that day. Joyce saw Galarraga approaching and immediately began weeping right there on the field in front of 40,000 people. Galarraga walked right up to the man who had ruined his greatest achievement, handed him the lineup card, and then reached out to pat him on the shoulder. It was a gesture of profound forgiveness and grace that left grown men crying in the stands. Galarraga later told reporters that nobody is perfect and everyone makes mistakes. Because of that incredible display of sportsmanship, many fans argue that the imperfect game is actually more legendary and culturally significant than a regular perfect game would have been. It taught the world a lesson in empathy that transcended the box score. So I have to ask you right now, If you were in Galarraga's shoes, could you have found it in your heart to forgive Jim Joyce the very next day? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to Comerica Deep Dive, Detroit Tigers, for more deep dives.